for our last but not least session of our great conference for the second day. I hope you enjoyed the previous one. I also hope that this one will not get you upset because you are finally getting here. My name is Geopolitics. I am a senior research fellow at Integratıon Research Institute, actually one of the organizers of this conference. Our session will be not purely economic one, even not purely finance one. But of course we will have two presentations from our leading economists. We also will have presentations which closely will relate with geopolitical issue and international relations. So let's start our session, and as you can notice, actually I'm the first one, I'm the first speaker. So let's begin. As you can see, I try to match my paper and my topic with the topic of the conference, the geopolitical shifts. And as I specialized on the Caspian studies, I decided that it would be a great opportunity to actually understand what kind of geopolitical shifts we can find in the Caspian Basin for at least 15 or 10 years, and what kind of impact of these geopolitical shifts can be observed from the economic perspective. But before I can show you some graphs and figures, I want to make you maybe some thinking. East Caspian region is actually a region from the economic perspective. Of course, when we are watching on the map, geographical map, of course, geographically it's a region. But I like one of the explanations, what kind of region from economic, in terms of economic one, the region can be called a region if the trade among the countries inside the region exceeds the volume of trade with the countries outside, outsiders. And from this point of view, it's rather questionable, is Caspian region actually a region? Before we can observe some statistical data, we need to clarify what kind of geopolitical shifts we also observed for two previous decades. Actually, I start from far away, 1998, when the first bilateral agreement on Caspian Sea delimitation was signed. Why I choose this? Decided to start from this exactly point. You know that since I am an international relations specialist, and legal regime of the Caspian Sea is one of the key issue for all Caspian studies experts. That's why I cannot pass this moment through. From this exact moment, we can observe a new era of Caspian delimitation dilemma dispute. That's why it's actually a good sign. Countries sign some agreement which makes them work together on other steps. But was it actually a geopolitical shift? We will find it out together. I know that all these actually events, you're quite familiar with it. But I need to remember you that in order to understand, is it really correlation between geopolitical shifts and regional trade in the Caspian Basin? And what actually geopolitical shifts affect regional trade mostly? Next one, you can see Azerbaijan Iran military incident. You probably heard about this, that Iranian military border guard services just ordered British petroleum ship, which investigated one of the disputable oil field in so-called Azerbaijani sector of the Caspian Sea. They ordered it to move, and since that time, this especially disputable field is out of research, investigation, and exploration. Actually, it was the only military incident, not the only, but the most well-known one. And actually, from this point of view, it also could affect some interrelation between Azerbaijan and Iran. That's why we also put it in the list. First Caspian Summit. It's a great deal actually. Because for 1 decade there was no gathering of leaders of the Caspian states. There was no even initiative together. And in 2002, we can observe that first Caspian Summit took place, and actually it launched another phase of this negotiation on the Caspian legal regime. Then you can observe that in 2003, there was a finalizing of some so-called Caspian package for delineation of Northern Caspian, between these three Northern Caspian states, littoral states, Russia, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan. Then you can observe some events that are actually not geopolitical one and not connected with legal regime. It's a great project, which actually energy one, but according to great amount of studies, it's also affect geopolitical position and situation in the Caspian Basin. Russia-Georgia conflict, actually it's not purely related to Caspian region, if we look at the region from only perspective of 5 little countries. But this conflict affect on working condition of Baku Tbilisi-Ceyhan. That's why it also affect geostrategical environment because of energy security. Then we can observe another dispute and another conflict and sanctions against Iran, against Russia, formation of very interesting union, actually custom union, which also in 5 years transformed into regional economic union. I also decided to put it here that European Commission give a mandate for negotiation for construction of Trans-Caspian pipeline. Why it's important? Because since that time, energy issues actually reactivized, and there was a need to strengthen the pressure on some little states, maybe to force even them to work closely with the European Union. Then you can find some transportation initiative which were launched in 2013, Trans-Caspian International Transport Route. Actually, there is another initiative, transportation one, it's a North-South Transport Corridor, but I didn't put it here because it's not working yet, and the potential of this transportation route it should be evaluated more closely. But the thing that China is a part of Trans-Caspian International Transportation Route makes this whole event very important for the region. Then we can find another conflict between Turkey and Russia, which also affect geopolitical situation in the Caspian region. And we come back to, we finalized all this list with agreement on conventional legal regime in the Caspian Sea, which were found out at December 2017 between the foreign ministers of 5 littoral states. They declared that convention will be signed this year, 2018. We confirmed, we Kazakhstan, that the summit will took place in the second half of the year, and the text of convention is already finalized. So, great opportunity and great challenges can be observed in the Caspian region for 2 decades, but is it really a challenge for economy? Is it really a significant influence of all these factors, all these incidents for regional trade? Let's start to actually find it out. This is the volume of regional trade from 1996 to 2016. Unfortunately, for 2017, there is no data for some special countries, for Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan. I'm still waiting for it, so I promise to update it as soon as I will get it. And you can see that regional trade, not purely, but mostly consists of trade turnover between two countries. It's Kazakhstan and Russia. And the share of these two bilateral trade is actually quite stable from 2 decades. It's not changing almost. In 1996, the share was, let's take it more closely, the share was 76%. Then, of course, it slightly decreased to 67% in 2016. But still, it's huge. It means that all other trade bilateral turnover plays so a significant role in all general trade turnovers, and we can perceive that probably before making some conclusions, but our working hypothesis can be that probably all issues, geopolitical one, which related to this pair of countries is actually more significant than other events related to Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Iran, for regional trade. If we look at more closely, for regional trade, it's up price and down price. You can see that there is a significant drop in Russian-Iran trade, and there is significant drop actually between Iran and Kazakhstan trade. And there is a counterbalance, The share of Russia and Kazakhstan trade in whole regional trade depends on the share of Iran in regional trade. As soon as Iran's share is decreasing, it means that automatically Kazakhstan and Russia share is increasing. And actually, it's if in terms of ranking, Iran is in third place after Russia, Kazakhstan, and second is Iran. Why actually is there any explanation for such a kind of drop? According to the list that I mentioned before, if you can notice, the drop occurred in 2011 and it's for Russia, and in 2007 for Kazakhstan. For Russia-Iran trade, actually one of the most important issues was sanctions. They were imposed in 2010, but as soon as Iran refused to make oil swaps between Kazakhstan with Kazakhstan and Russia, the share of trade turnover started to decrease dramatically. You can actually observe the trend for decreasing and the share of Iran trade and in Russia and Kazakhstan. I will show you another one. It's a sum of for all 10 regional pairs. 5 countries, 10 economic pairs of 10 turnover, which consist combined of regional trade. You can actually observe that from 2002, the regional, bilateral trade between Kazakhstan and Russia started to increase. In 2002, there was the first Caspian summit took place, and everything seems good. But actually, the first Caspian summit is not the issue. It's not the main case why this growth were observed, because it actually failed. There was no agreement on the summit. All the leaders of the Caspian states went home in very furious feelings because they even quarreled with each other. There was no even declaration document after this meeting, and it took much negotiation, progress, and impulses to force them, I can even say this word, to meet again. That's why it's not the issue. If you also can observe into the agreement between Russia and Kazakhstan, first agreement on the 1998, but there was no actually growth between these two countries. I mean, into trade turnover. Also confirmed that there is no correlation actually. What we have for decreasing part between in trade, it's also occurred in 2008. 2008 actually it was financial crisis, and all other issues which I mentioned before didn't take so much impact on bilateral trade of these two regional countries, and there was also devaluation of tenge and ruble, financial crisis, lack of liquidity, and so on and so forth. There was actually no direct correlation between all mentioned factors on this period. The second drop occurred in 2012. What event we can observe according to my geopolitical shifts list. Also, actually, it's also purely economic one. It's a global, actually, the global one, not the regional one. And also, if you can observe the graphs on other regional pairs trade, of course, there's some decrease and increase, but comparing with Russia and Kazakhstan, this, this change didn't look so significant, and we can actually confirm our first impression of the graphs from regional trade total version, total trade. The share of Russia in total trade is 416. It's a year old, 2016. For Kazakhstan it's 20%, 11 for Azerbaijan, 5 for Iran, and 9 for Turkmenistan. Unfortunately, for Turkmenistan it's only 15, 2015. But the share of other, states in bilateral and in comparing the whole trade with all other regions and countries, I don't know, in less than 1%. It means that Russia, is not the game. It's a country which actually makes some kind of rule and trend and challenges also connected with Russia automatically affects the regional trade. So, what kind of conclusion can be actually made? Having a look on all these graphs, it's quite, I hope it was quite obvious that Kazakhstan and Russian trade it has a huge amount, a lion's share of regional trade. If we look at the figures, it accounts for 67%, and 13 billion, it's for 16 of course, in 17 it's even more. It's about 15 million. But all regional trade is only 90. That's why the major part of geopolitical shifts have limited impact of regional trade. Only in case it's not affect Kazakhstan regional relations. Only in this case, geopolitical issues affect regional trade. As I told you before, in my opinion, of course, you can discuss on this issue, legal issue and legal dispute and legal regime also didn't have direct correlation between increase or decrease of regional trade. It means that countries find a way, to put aside some legal disputes and find some space of economic interaction, avoiding some disputable moments. Of course, if it will be a convention which will be signed this year, I hope, there could be some changes. But still, from my point of view, it will not bring some dramatic changes. It will not bring, the significant or, impressive increase in trade, because all disputes are solved. No, actually, you will not see. And unfortunately, all energy and transportation projects, especially Trans-Caspian, I mean Trans-Caspian International Road, Trans-Caspian gas pipeline, even Trans-Caspian oil pipeline, which both are not exist. All initiatives like Traseka and North-South corridor, they are not improving actually regional trade. What is, the real engine of regional trade is Russia. If Russia will more interested in regional trade, it will be more interested in developing its pre-Caspian republics and territories. Only in this case, this region will have opportunity, to increase significantly in regional trade, and vice versa. If Russia does not have resources to do that under these international sanctions, it means that for a region it will be stagnation in trade. That's why, and also it will affect Kazakhstan because we are one of the main partners, or for us, Russia is one of the main partners. Actually, Russia is one of the main sponsors for all pre-Caspian regional states. That's according to all these points. Even sanction against Iran didn't put such effect on regional trade as sanctions put on Russian Federation. Actually, I suppose that my colleague Gauren will make this topic in more details because his presentation concentrated on sanction issue on Russia and its effect on Kazakhstan trade. Well, thank you for your attention. I hope you like it and enjoy it. Since I finished my presentation as a chair, I need to give the floor to our second speaker. And I with great pleasure to give the floor to our guest of South Korea. So sorry, South Korea. We actually very glad that you are here because we're discussing these issues that majority of our presenters were from Turkey. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for giving a chance to present my paper at this conference. My name is Woo Sung-min from Saban University in Korea. In this paper, we discuss the international linkage among the Southeast Asian countries, namely China, Japan, and Korea. In particular, we examine to what extent the housing markets and business cycles are connected with each other. Let me begin with the motivation of this paper. I think empirical evidence on commonality in cross-country business cycle fluctuations is an important issue in the macroeconomics literature, which ranges from classical analysis of pairwise GDP correlations to more recent analysis of dynamic latent factor models. We know housing is an important sector of the national economy because fluctuation in real estate market have a direct impact on the level of economic activities, while housing prices are affected by economic conditions. However, housing sector has received little attention in spite of its importance in business cycle analysis, whereas empirical research on financial market has been extensive. I've listed several papers on this area. There has been quite a few studies on evidence of commonality in macroeconomic fluctuations. As for the analysis, ripple effects or spillover effects in regional housing markets, Holmes and McDonald and Tyler, and so on. And international housing market connectiveness has received increasing attention since the global financial crisis. I think it's because after U.S. housing market collapsed, the price has spread out globally. And many researchers present evidence that The spillover effects and the connectiveness exist in both regional and global housing markets. And as for the analysis, connectedness among Asian countries, Liu examined co-movements and correlation across Asian countries and bilateral spillover effects within 3 Greater China using rich index. However, I think that the rich index is not entirely reflecting the housing markets. In this paper, we examine the nature and dynamics of connectiveness in the 3 Northeast Asian countries. First, we examine whether and to what the extent the 3 Northeast Asian countries move together with other economies. We also discuss time-varying aspects of connectiveness measures using the rolling sample analysis. So, we use the method in DeWolder and Ilmax, which is called connectedness approach, and is politically useful as it empirically measures spillover index at various levels through various decompositions of VR models. So, next, I'll briefly go over the empirical method used in this paper. Although I guess some of you in the audience already know about this approach, it may sound a bit technical. However, if you know the basic structure of VR model, it's not that difficult. The connectiveness approach is based upon generalized forecast error variance decomposition for a stationary VR model. So, as step ahead, generalized forecast error variance decomposition is defined as this equation. And based on this, this expression shows pairwise directional spillover from J's market to I's market, which measures the fraction of forecast error variance in I's market due to the shocks in J's market in VR system. Based on this pairwise directional connectiveness, we can drive various connectiveness measures and also build connectiveness table. This is static analysis, and by using rolling sample analysis, we can capture dynamics or time-varying aspects of the connectiveness which you are interested in. So, let me explain more details on connectiveness table. In this table, the diagonal elements capture the one variance share, and the off-diagonal elements show cross-variance share. That is pairwise directional connectiveness from J's market to I's market. And pairwise directional connectiveness reflects individual elements. We also define net pairwise directional connectiveness, which is calculated as the difference between 2 elements, like that, theta 2 minus theta 1, 2. If this measure is plus, then x1 market affects x2 market. And if this measure is minus, then vice versa. We also build 2 others, which is calculated as the sum of all column elements except one element. And similarly, from others is calculated as the sum of all row elements except one element. The 2 others and from others measure growth. Sometimes we also interest in net as opposed growth, which is calculated as the difference between 2 and from. Next, finally, the total connectiveness measure is the ratio of the sum of sum of all off-diagonal elements to the sum of its all elements. This referred to as system-wide connectedness. I explained all these measures before, and first is pairwise direction connectedness, left, and total to and from, and so I skip it. And I also explained that and total connectedness. In this paper, we examine the international linkage among those Asian countries. We use quarterly GDP and housing market data, and the quarterly change or return series are calculated as a difference in the natural logarithm of two consecutive observations. First, we start by using housing market data. Then we extend the analysis by including GDP in VR model to examine business cycles and housing markets in this region. And I will show the GDP and housing prices graph. The first rows are trend and second rows are changes. And from this figure, we can observe different patterns, housing price and GDP across country. In particular, China and Korea upward trend, whereas Japan is downward trend. And most countries show high volatility during the global financial crisis period. And this is a summary statistic of housing, summary statistics of changes on return in percentage term. From this table, you can see the Chinese housing prices and GDP is the largest positive value in average, whereas Japanese housing prices is minus 0.6, and Japanese GDP is the most smallest. And Korea seems stand in middle both housing price and GDP growth rate. And this is the estimated connectedness table. Here we consider three housing markets. As I mentioned before, diagonal entry measure one variance share and is very high. In particular, in case of Korea, 99% of its variation can be explained by its one shot. And off-diagonal entry measure pairwise directional spillover effects. In particular, the largest pairwise directional spillover effect is 2% for China. And the total connectivity index is right comma is 1.9%. And these results show that the connectedness among the three Asian housing markets is quite low. Next, I extend the analysis by including GDP in VR model. So, what do you notice here? By including GDP in the model, we obtain a larger total connectedness measure with 23.2%. However, housing market in one country is more affected by its own economic condition than that of neighboring effects. As for the Chinese housing market, 24% of valuation can be explained by Chinese GDP. And as for the Chinese housing market, mostly depend on its GDP. These results indicate that housing market connectedness is more of a domestic cross-regional phenomenon rather than international one. The connectedness table that I talked about so far is provide kind of average aspects for full sample, And by using the rolling sample analysis, we can capture dynamics or time-varying aspects of the connectiveness. This is the time series plot of total connectiveness with 10-year rolling sample window. The black line is GDP plus housing, and red line is for GDP, and the dashed black line is housing. And the estimated total connectiveness measure show a sharp rise around the global financial crisis in 2008. And the total connectiveness index has been slowly increasing due to growing growth of Chinese economy. However, the total connectiveness across the three Asian housing markets has been quite low. Next, I will show the net directional connectiveness measures composed by countries. In this graph, the effect of China on other Northeast Asian countries has been increasing since the global financial crisis. Whereas Japan shows negative net connectiveness with decreasing influence on other countries. And before I finish, I'd like to introduce two results on housing market connectiveness. The first is G7 housing market, and we use quarterly observation. The first row is level, and second row is changes. And this is the estimated connectiveness table. And from this table, we can see the US and UK market has been the most influential market, affecting other G7 housing markets. And the total speed index is 18.3%, which indicates that international linkage among G7 housing markets is relatively higher than for the Northeast Asian region. Although a direct comparison is not fair, as we have different number of countries for Northeast Asian region. Next, we also consider domestic cross-regional housing markets using 15 regional housing market data in Korea. And this is all 15 regional housing market level graph. And this is the estimated total connectiveness measure. This is a connectiveness table, and the total connectiveness index is 64.5%, which is higher than for G7 housing markets. And this result reflects domestic regional market is more higher than international one. And let me now summarize with my presentation concluding remarks. In this paper, we examine whether and to what the extent the three Northeast Asian countries move together with other economies. The basic finding is that the international linkage among the three Northeast Asian countries is quite weak, and the estimate total connectiveness measures vary over the business cycle with the shoes around the global financial crisis. And this result suggests that housing market connectiveness is more of a domestic cross-regional phenomenon rather than international one, given earlier evidence that cross-regional speed works within one country are high. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.
So you all know the background when in February 2014 Russia annexed Crimea and then it put pressure on Ukraine and started to interfere in eastern Ukraine by supporting some separatist groups there. The West, led by the United States, began to apply sanctions against Russia. And sanctions were employed in several stages against Russian companies, businesses, individuals, officials, in the form of travel bans, in the form of restrictions on loans, on export-import operations, and so on. Restrictions on cooperation with some certain Russian companies. Of course, all of this put a significant pressure on the Russian economy, and it was combined with the rapid decline in oil prices. That's one of the reasons why we cannot distinguish, for example, what is the direct impact of sanctions and what is the impact of oil prices, because they pretty much came at the same time. So we can of course say that Western sanctions had a role to play in the devaluation of the Russian ruble and the subsequent inflation in Russia, flight of capital, of course, out of Russia, which amounted to billions of dollars. Russia, in response, took some sanctions of its own in retaliation to the Western sanctions. You all know about the ban on food imports, which was applied against primarily the United States, the European Union, as well as some other Western allies such as Norway, Australia, Canada. And, well, the primary target of, or victims of Russian sanctions became the European countries. We all know about the serious disagreements with the European Union sanctions policy, which we saw in some European countries, in France, in Germany, in Italy, in some Eastern European countries. So, as we see, Western sanctions against Russia, they had multiple effects, not just on Russia, but also some other countries. Again, those sanctions were supplemented by US sanctions against Moscow following the alleged interference of Russian security services in the US presidential elections. It added to the batch of sanctions. You may remember the Magnitsky Act. Now we have this UK case with the Skripal case, with the alleged poisoning with Novichok and so on. So we see this growing trend of sanctions applied against Russia. Of course, as I said, this domino spillover effect of Western sanctions affected a number of countries, and Kazakhstan was, as Russia's closest ally, which is integrated with Russia in many dimensions, was also affected. And look at the history of our relations with Russia since not only with Tsarist or Soviet times, but also the independence times. The Russian vector was always the most important in our foreign policy, and we always considered ourselves to be Russia's most important ally, probably. We developed our relations both at the bilateral level and at the regional level, at the level of international organizations. We are members with Russia in a number of organizations. You know, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, European Economic Union as the most important ones, not to mention the Commonwealth of Independent States. And as such, Kazakhstan is very dependent on Russia. We are integrated, but at the same time we are dependent. For example, just for trade, for our trade, main trade, transit routes, for the transportation of our energy resources. And it's quite natural that we've also felt this impact of sanctions. If we turn to political implications, probably we can say that to some extent we've become a hostage of Russia's policy, because as an ally we have to at least not to contradict to what Russia says. it narrowed our room for maneuver, and we have to always weigh our statements. For example, just to take the Crimean case, when Kosovo took place, we said from the very beginning that we are against any separatism. We are for the territorial integrity of states, but in the Crimean case, we had to be cautious. We said that we understand Russian motives, so it was quite a diplomatic formulation, but still, it was to some extent, I would say, we had to retreat from our firm position on territorial integrity. Again, we also, if we remember 1990s, along with Ukraine, we got rid of nuclear weapons in exchange for the guarantees received from nuclear powers. And of course, when even if we don't openly acknowledge the annexation of Crimea, we also understood that it could have some implications for Kazakhstan. At the same time, we are feeling increasing pressure from both sides. So the West wants us to openly express our disagreement with the Russian position. Moscow wants us to be always on their side. Just to take recent examples, the voting, and here I can also say that to some extent we also become a hostage of our own active foreign policy. We started the Syrian peace process, to be involved in the Syrian peace process, the Astana format. It was quite successful, but now it doesn't feel so comfortable. The UN, the United Nations Security Council non-permanent membership also, it was good for our image, for our reputation, but now when we have to vote on some very sensitive resolutions, we have to always balance between the West, Russia and others. And for example, the recent case when we refrained during the voting, and it evoked some nervous statements from Russian officials saying that we cannot understand Kazakhstan, why it did not vote in favor of the Russian resolution and so on. Or statements by Lavrov, for example, saying that Kazakhstan should always coordinate its foreign policy initiatives with Moscow, referring to our visa-free entry, for example, for Western citizens and so on. So of course, as I said, in the political realm, we kind of feel this narrowing of the space for maneuvering. Does it signify to some extent that we have to end our multi-vector foreign policy, or should we be more flexible? Should we apply some more sophisticated diplomatic tactics? Of course, it will present a challenge, and we should not be dragged into this confrontation, of course. At the same time, we don't want to be, I don't know if you read Mr. Surkov's latest article on that Russia expects 100 or 200 years of so-called geopolitical loneliness. Yes, loneliness. So, of course, it wants us as the allies to join them, but should we become their, companions in this geopolitical loneliness? So, of course, we need to try to keep this the role of the impartial mediator. But of course, it's going to be difficult, and that's what I want to look at in my paper, to look from different angles and to study. As for economic implications, as I said, we are quite interconnected, and in my opinion, the largest impact was in the financial sector, as Russia, as Lydia showed, one of our largest trade partners, and our national currency I think, quite strongly tied to the Russian ruble, because as we witnessed in our past, we had to look at our currency rate to see if it's, when we tried to maintain it at certain levels, it was detrimental for our national economy, so we had to devaluate it, and so on. Of course, again, as in the case of ruble, it was a combined effect of both low oil prices and sanctions, but still, since we followed the suit, we followed the ruble's dynamics, of course it had, and in the end, in August 2015, we had to dramatically devaluate our currency. We started the policy of free floating exchange rate or inflation targeting. So now, and about a week ago, for example, when the latest round of sanctions against Russian oligarchs was imposed, the Russian ruble felt its impact, and it was a day or two afterwards that we also felt its impact. Of course, other implications also include, since the Russian economy is contracting to some extent, so does our cooperation, some joint projects, and some of our Kazakh industries, they also suffer. For example, when Russia protects its domestic market, because we also feel this impact, and we see a restricted access to the Russian market. Our goods cannot easily, despite our agreements in the Eurasian Economic Union, but there is some problems that we started to feel after the introduction of sanctions. Again, because of the imposition of Russia's retaliatory sanctions, we had some problems with logistics, with customs procedures, and it hindered our export-import operations. Goods designated for Kazakhstan could not easily cross Russian borders, and so it took some time before we were able to reach agreements and stabilize the flow of goods to Kazakhstan, out of Kazakhstan. So probably we can say that to some extent, if in the case of our foreign policy we became a hostage of our active foreign policy, probably in the economic terms we can say that we've become a hostage of our president's Eurasian integration idea. Because you see, when the Eurasian Economic Union was conceived, it was proposed as the practical implementation of President Nazarbayev's idea. But of course it was Putin's project. I mean, it's not the initial idea that President Nazarbayev put forward in 1994. So, and of course, Russia saw it differently. For Russia, of course, it had more probably political dimensions than economic. And when some of our experts opposed the Eurasian Economic Union, they were saying that, well, we're going to, it's not going to be a union of equals. We're going to feel some effect of this, and so for our president, of course, it was difficult to say no, we're not going to join, because it was proposed, it was presented as his own idea. So probably, and of course, in many instances it was our own fault, the fault of our negotiators, because we were not able to negotiate some items in our favor. The Russian side, they employed strong tactics, they put a strong team of negotiators, and so now we are reaping the fruits of those, I would say, deficiencies of our trade and economic diplomacy back in the 2000s and 2010. So there is also a risk that some observers expect in case if the United States decides to further strengthen its sanctions against Russia, they say that there is a risk that Kazakhstan may lose its if Russia decides to block all supplies of energy to the West, then Kazakhstan will become a hostage of the Russian policy, and then it will have to look for alternatives. It will have to increase its energy exports in the Chinese direction. That it will have to intensify its cooperation probably with Iran via swaps, but how viable are they? Are we going to intensify our oil shipments via the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan? So, of course, all of this needs to be studied, and how these alternatives are politically possible. Will Russia support this or not? So, all of these are interesting topics for research. And I'm not an economist, but I will try to look at what possible measures would our government take to mitigate the current and potential effects. So, just as a conclusion, probably, again, Russia, we are not going to go away from Russia. Russia will geographically remain our neighbor, and it will politically remain our closest ally, but we, of course, to balance Russia, to balance China, we need continued cooperation with the West. It will help us stabilize our regional balance of power. It will help us promote the recent regional integration initiatives. Well, if not integration, then cooperation initiatives with our Central Asian neighbors. Of course, we participate in a number of anti-Western, presumably anti-Western alliances such as the CSTO or SCO, but it should not prevent us from pursuing cooperation with the United States and the European Union, because I believe that maintaining our multi-vector policy should remain the cornerstone of our foreign policy. As I said, the only possible strategy of dealing with Russia for Kazakhstan, of course, is promoting good neighborly relations, because when you have more than 6,000 kilometer long border with some nuclear power and one of the superpowers, of course, you don't have any choice. So it's going to be a challenge, and it is complicated by the imminent political transition in Kazakhstan, and it will, of course, present new challenges. It may become destabilizing for our country's future, for our national security, and probably we need to continue pursuing this policy of soft balancing, diversified cooperation with outside actors to counterbalance Russia, others, and so on. As for economic implications, what I see as a potential area of research, since we cannot distinguish between the effects of low oil prices and sanctions, one option that I want to pursue is to start case studies, because if you look at certain companies, how they were affected by Western sanctions, probably it would be a good idea to look at, for example, I've heard about one pipe producing company in Kazakhstan which, because of Russia's decision to cut some projects with the West, it had to cut its production and so on. So probably it will be a good idea to pursue, to study just case by case analysis and look at how certain companies suffered from Western sanctions because of Western sanctions and so on. So that's what I would like to look at in the future. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. The idea is that we are hostage in our own active foreign policy, just through brilliant. Actually, yes, I totally agree. Not to be in a rush. We are not in a rush, but still we almost finished our session. That's why I'm sorry, but I have to ask our next colleague to be short in their presentation. I give a floor to my other colleague, it's Daniel Babayev, his presentation.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a presentation, so, and I'll try to be quite big. So my actual my presentation today will be about optimum currency area. Actually, it will be is the Eurasian Economic Union an optimum currency area. So it was already told several times that we have Eurasian Economic Union, so established by Kazakhstan, Russia, and Belarus, and we have also Armenia, Kyrgyzstan. So it was told already. So and Nazarbayev was one of the first people that told that suggested to create such kind of union. So and later, after the creation of the economic union, our President Nazarbayev and Russian President Putin told several times that there is a possibility that the union, the economic union, will end up as a currency union, let's say, like European Union has. So, that was a proposed idea by our presidents. So, in this research, I'm going to show that economic union in our region isn't the best idea. So, in overall, the idea of optimum currency area was started in early 60s. So it was proposed by Mandel, a renowned economist. So and he told that in order to be able to create a currency area, currency union, countries have to have, let's say, factor mobility, meaning that labor mobility. So countries has to be able to allow their workers to change their jobs to work in each country. So labor mobility, let's say. And there has to be also mobility of price, wage, and there has to be a very good financial development. So, and the idea why some countries like plan of creating, say, some currency union it's very clear. So, like by having a currency union, you are just like decreasing transaction costs. So the countries just don't need to, let's say, exchange their, the producers of different countries, the enterprises, entities of different countries don't need to exchange their currencies, so they can just freely trade with each other without any problems, without exchange rate fluctuations or something. So that is why it is thought that currency union is a quite good idea. So, but Mandel in his research notifies that not always it's good to have currency union, because if some countries have currency union, they can suffer from, let's say, asymmetric shocks. So when I say asymmetric shocks, I mean not all countries might be affected. Let's say not all regions of the currency area can be affected by some shocks equally. So some, for example, fall of oil prices might affect significantly Kazakhstan, but it might not affect significantly, let's say, Kyrgyzstan or Armenia or something. So yeah, that's why there is an asymmetric asymmetric shocks, let's say, that somehow can have negative effects on currency union. So that is one of the downsides of currency arrears. So later, Kinnan, which is another very renowned economist, suggested that to avoid that asymmetric shocks, countries in the union have to also unify their fiscal policies. So yeah, that was the decision that that was the idea that somehow could cover that asymmetric shocks. So so without integrating their fiscal policies, there is no reason of creating. Let's say no, there are reasons some maybe, but the union might somehow be not as effective as it would have been if there was some kind of integration in fiscal policies. So I can give you an example. European Monetary Union. So it has a lot of factors that indicate that it's a good example for currency union. For example, it has capital mobility, price and wage flexibility, and labor mobility, and it also has very developed financial sector. So, meaning that it was a good place. But in the early 2000s, the European Monetary Union was created and the euro was introduced. And at first, in the, let's say, first 8 years, it was going pretty well. Let's say, for example, the share of European Monetary Union grew from about 20% to 23% from, let's say, early 2000 to 2007. It's pre-crisis times. And unemployment rates in the European Monetary Union countries declined from 9.3% to 7.4% in 2007 from early 2000s. So at first it was quite a good idea, but in 2008 and 2009, after the global financial economic crisis, we found out that, in fact, some countries, because of the asymmetric shocks that I told before, suffered really much. For example, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, for example. Some of them are still having really significant problems with their economies. So, and if, for example, Greece was not in the currency union, it was able to, let's say, introduce some kind of expansionary policies. For example, just to put it in plain words, it could have just print money. So to help its economy to overcome the crisis, but it wasn't able because of the currency union, where none of the countries can have their own, let's say, printing machine. So that is why it shows that currency union not always good idea without having an integrated fiscal policies. So, and let's get to my main point. So, and let's compare our region, so Eurasian Economic Union, which has, let's say, 5 countries. Yeah, it has 5 countries. So, and the problem of these countries, of this economic union, is that we don't have any diversified economy. So most of our export, for example, about 60% of export of the union, of the Eurasian Economic Union, is mineral commodities. So, for example, in Russia it was in 2014 about 75. In Kazakhstan it was like 65%. So we are not a diversified economy. I mean, yeah. So, and we do not trade with each other much. Actually, it might sound strange, but in fact we don't have really good integration in trade. So, for example, I have a bit old dates, but in 2014, only 13.5% of the total trade of these countries were in the was mutual trade, so among these countries. So only 13.5%. So meaning that it's very low. So about 86.5% of the trade was with other countries. So there was not any point of creating currency union to help trade. So there was not really good trade. So, well, next idea is that we don't have any really developed financial sector, as you already know. For example, there is a financial development ranking which shows that Russia 32nd in the financial development ranking, while Armenia 99th, let's say Belarus 129th, Kazakhstan 89th, and Kyrgyzstan is 129th. So we are placed way down, way below. So we don't have any developed financial sector. So that is why it is not very wise to create a currency union. So, and in general, I don't think that in the future our government actually is going to, I can say about the Kazakhstani government, let's say, to create any currency union, because to be able to create currency, if we create currency union, we have to also create some kind of fiscal union. And having some kind of fiscal union and monetary union, we somehow might lose our independence, which is a very, let's say, important question for Kazakhstan, because we had been for a long time part of Soviet Union. So, and that is why I think our government is not willing to, let's say, lose its independence in fiscal and monetary parts. So that was actually my conclusion. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting. Probably while we are waiting, maybe there's opportunity to answer for one question if there's any or speakers that already presented their papers. If some, of course.
So I can ask for question. So I think you were showing like a yearly trading activities in each country, level of the agreement, like billion or something like that. So I'm just wondering if there is anything changed if you use like a percentage of the trade between the countries. Since, but why I'm saying is that because Azerbaijan is a small country, maybe I'm not sure about the numbers, but I'm just saying maybe their trading activity is very low. But all the trading activity with Russia, but in the the billion level is just maybe 1 billion. But maybe in the Kazakhstan have $100 million or $1 billion of trading, but just 50% or whatever, 20 billion of with Russia. But if you compare it to numbers, then 20 billion is always higher than 1 billion, right? But it's not showing that maybe Azerbaijan used 100% of their
Actually, I have a
trade.
slide on the part on the share of Russia in trade with both for Azerbaijan, for Kazakhstan, for Iran, and But yes, that's why for if you, I don't remember exact numbers, but the percentages is higher comparing with the share of Kazakhstan in total trade of Azerbaijan. It's less than 1%. For Azerbaijan, it's more than almost 20, less than 20. I don't know exactly. I don't remember exactly. For Iran, it's only 9. It's changing from time to time. Sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 10. For 16, it was 9. So comparing, yes, of course, numbers and the share of these numbers in the total trade give us another picture. That's why I totally agree. We need to keep it in mind that on this, some figures can show you only figures, but not the dynamics.
And one more question also. I think you were also like showing one event and then what happened in the next year or something like that, all the trading.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not exactly sure, but I think that like event happened like let's say on January,
Mm-hmm.
but then I think most of the events that you were showing like they get an agreement like after 1 month or like pretty soon. Like you know, Russia and Turkey we get like this jets crash or something like that. But then I think after 1 month or something like that we get an agreement with Russia. Like it's not like going like a whole year or something like that. So you know, like if you are looking at the whole year trading activity, and I think after they get agreement, the trading like increasing a lot. You know, like to catch up to all the missing months. So I think if you are like dealing with the whole year trading activities, you don't really see those like events effect. So I'm not sure whether you can get the data or not, but maybe you can shorten the time, like 6 months or something like that, around the event. Then you may like get better results of the effect of the event on the trading activities.
Yeah, you are quite right. It's a good idea to shorten the period and to focus on some not such huge list of possible geopolitical shifts, but some kind of five or top three. Yeah, and look at the special period when actually it was cursed and what actually cursed after. What happened after this actually, or before? Is there any impact on trade by months or by quarters and so on? Yes, I thank you for this idea. I will totally use it for maybe for top three of latest events. Thank you. So we have our presentation.
Let me start. Well, I understand that we have very little time, so I'll try to be as quick as I can. Well, I'm about to present my paper. This is a joint paper. Well, it's not a full presentation of the paper. Basically, it's about politics, geography, and the implications of geography policies to trade in Central Asia and Central Asian countries with the rest of the world. Well, first of all, I'd like to have a look on this map of Central Asian countries. The paper is about trade relations with between these 5 countries of Central Asia. Well, there were serious problems with data gathering. You know that some of the Central Asian countries are very close and isolationist. That's why some of our analysis also only were made for Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and the rest of the countries are very limited. So, for example, Turkmenistan is a very isolationist country, well, kind of North Korea, Central Asian version of North Korea. If to look at the history of the region, well, all 5 countries are post-Soviet countries, and this really has an impact on the trade relations of the 5 countries, since all 5 countries tend to trade very much with Russia and other countries than between each other, in spite of geographic proximity, cultural similarities, and etc. There's also very much about geography of the region. So, geographically, this is a very complex region, kind of isolated, far away from oceans and seas, which makes it very difficult to trade with the rest of the world, only with neighboring countries. So that is why the transit corridors for the regions, for this region are of vital importance. Apart from that, these countries are populated differently. Most of the population is concentrated in this area called Fergana Valley, the most populated country of the region is Uzbekistan. The whole population of the region is about 65 million. And the geographic barriers of trade include the mountains that separate these countries and complex borders between Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. There is a territorial distance between these countries. Trade. I'll show you some figures of trade. These are World Bank data for trade for freight costs from the Central Asian countries. These are very high costs if you look at the figures. Well, first of all, these countries are very dependent on exports of raw materials. Kazakhstan is very dependent on oil and gas, like Turkmenistan. Uzbekistan is the same. Tajikistan also exports large amounts of mineral products, and very dependent on imports too, because all these 5 countries have to import a wide range of stuffs into their country because they do not produce many of these commodities. These are costs of trade with European countries, CIS countries, and the rest of the world. If you compare these figures of transit time, these are about 2 weeks. Well, it's makes it very difficult to have trade relations, and transit costs are several thousands of dollars per container. If to compare with within the European Union, we have all these several from 1 to 4 typically $1,000 per container. These are the components, composition of exports of the countries. As you can see, very concentrated export structure of the countries. Kazakhstan relies very much on petrochemicals. Kyrgyzstan has kind of diversified, relatively diversified export structure. Tajikistan depends on minerals and metals, and Turkmenistan all exports only gas. These are the one of the distinct features of the countries of the Central Asian region is that these countries are geographically isolated. Apart from that, many countries of the region are politically and culturally isolated from the rest of the world. Well, to compare with Georgia, it's a country with integrated with the European Union. Kyrgyzstan stands just next to Georgia, Ukraine, Turkey. Kazakhstan is relatively open to the rest of the world. These are numbers of international arrivals, number of passengers coming to the country. Then goes Russia, Mongolia, and the rest of the Central Asian countries have very small numbers of international arrivals. Turkmenistan is the least. Well, these are non-tariff costs, which would go into our analysis. Non-tariff costs. These are costs related to doing trade, but not these do not include tariff costs. These are non-tariff costs. We can see that many countries of the region have very extremely high trade costs. These are Tajikistan and some these are old data, but current data are not different from this. Well, Tajikistan and Pakistan, despite geographic proximity, well, just across Afghanistan, in spite of that, the cost is really high between these countries, cost of trade. That's why many of the countries do not trade either even with South Asian countries like Pakistan, India, Iran, and etc. Well, but these countries are heavily dependent on trade with former Soviet countries. Well, Kazakhstan has about 20% of its trade with Russia, another 20% is done with China, about 40% is done with European Union, but these trade is almost totally consists of oil exports of Kazakhstan to the European Union. And imports of European commodities. Well, about from 10 to 12% of trade of the trade of Kazakhstan is made with the rest of the world, and less than 10% of trade of Kazakhstan is made with its partners of Central Asia. Well, politically, in political terms, the region is very isolated too. Well, not isolated, but do not cooperate with each other. Well, there's, in spite of geographic proximity, these countries do not cooperate. Well, there's no union that would include all 5 countries together, and that would facilitate trade and economic cooperation. Well, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan are members of the Eurasian Union. Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan are separate. Well, Turkmenistan is an extreme case. It does not participate in any of the unions and cooperation. And well, these are our findings and analysis, a summary from analysis. These are trade partners of Central Asian countries. These we made this for 2 countries of the region. This sorry about this must be Kazakhstan. This is a mistake. Well, Kazakhstan is a growing trend of trade with other countries, and its trade with Central Asia grows, as well as its trade with the rest of the world. The same pictures we can see for Kyrgyzstan, and we have if we have a look on this, well, comparing the exports of Central Asian countries to the rest of the world and its exports to its Central Asian partners, we can see an interesting picture here. Well, very little percentage of Kazakhstan's trade is made with Central Asian countries, confirming these statements I made before. Well, Kyrgyzstan is about the same, but still somewhat diversified geographic structure of its trade. We've estimated the index of export concentration. Well, this can be done with many techniques. Well, Gini index, Herkendahl Benjamin index, and Shannon index, etc. We can see that comparing the export concentration of concentrated exports, the exports that are concentrated in one or a few goods, and the diversified exports of the other case, where exports consist of many different commodities. Well, we can see that the export concentration of Kazakhstan to Central Asian country, to the rest of the world, is very concentrated. It's logical because Kazakhstan exports mainly oil and gas in large amounts to European countries and other countries. Well, when it comes to trade with Central Asian partners, the trade is very diversified and complicated. About the same picture we can see for Kyrgyzstan. Concentration of trade grows during the period, and the concentration of goods exported to Central Asian countries falls during the period. Share of top 5 industries is another way of showing the same pattern for two Central Asian countries. Well, about the same for Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. These are trade gravity analysis we made, including such variables like distance, culture, border, and income per capita. This analysis was made for Kazakhstan only. Well, interestingly, distance has distance matters when we consider trade of Kazakhstan, and culture also matters. Well, border and GNI per capita do not have importance influencing on the trade of Kazakhstan. Well, I would like to talk about this more about the limit of time. First of all, I'll show you another piece of our analysis. Well, this is for an export sophistication index. Well, it's kind of interesting index. The commodities are shown in an ascending order of their level of sophistication. Sophisticated commodities include technical commodities with high value added, and the low value added commodities are the ones that have the smallest sophistication index. Well, comparing the trade sophistication index or trade, these are combined indices for 5 Central Asian countries, well, except for Turkmenistan. There's no data for Turkmenistan. Trade with each other is shown in blue. These are vice versa. Trade with Central Asia is shown with red, showing that trade within the region is more sophisticated. Well, and whereas the trade with the rest of the world is very, very concentrated and includes, basically consists of simple commodities.